Hello. Today we will open one of the darkest pages in Germany's criminal history. A case so horrific that just mentioning the name of the killer sends chills down people's spines. Joachim Kroll, a name that haunted Germany for over 20 years, from 1955 to 1976, lurked in the shadows, spreading terror through a series of brutal murders. It wasn't until 1976, through a random coincidence during a police raid, that this monster in human form was finally caught in the web of justice. Kroll confessed to all of his horrific crimes over the span of 21 years, describing in detail how he murdered and even ate his victims, most of whom were young women. His reason for these horrific acts was shocking. He claimed that he did it to save money. He said that in the post-war period, prices in Germany skyrocketed and meat became too expensive. This justification sounds absurd and terrifying. This case caused a nationwide shock, becoming one of the most horrifying criminal cases in Germany's history. So what turned Joachim Kroll into such a monster? Let's go back in time to his childhood to uncover the answer. Joachim Kroll was born on April the 17th, 1933, in Hindenburg, Germany, into a poor working-class family. That year was also when Adolf Hitler rose to power, opening a dark chapter for Germany. Fascism emerged, and militarism and dictatorship spread throughout society, plunging the country into chaos. Kroll's childhood was shaped by this turbulent period. His father was a miner, the only economic support for the family, while his mother stayed at home taking care of their 9 children, Kroll being the 6th. In a large, poor family, Kroll not only lacked material wealth, but also love and affection from his relatives. From a young age, he did not experience the warmth of a happy family. When Kroll was 6 years old, World War II broke out, shattering his already unstable life. His father was drafted into the military and disappeared, with no one knowing his fate. Some said he was taken prisoner by the Soviet army, while others claimed he died in the war. Either way, the family lost its only financial support. Kroll's mother had to support her 9 children and moved the family to the western part of Germany, in the Nord-Vive area. At that time, Germany was divided into different zones controlled by the Allies, and the economy was devastated by the war. Millions of Germans were left homeless, and poverty was rampant. Like most German families after the war, Kroll's family lived in poverty, turmoil, and exile. Their economic situation worsened, relying only on the small wages his mother earned from odd jobs. In this environment, both materially and emotionally deprived, Kroll's childhood was filled with hardship and misfortune. He suffered from malnutrition for a long period, becoming frail and sickly, and his intellectual development lagged behind that of his peers. This led to bullying at school, and his academic performance was dreadful. The pressure from his family also weighed heavily on him. As the 6th child, he was never valued by anyone. His siblings rejected him, and his mother was too busy to care for the children. These experiences gradually formed Kroll's introverted, distant personality. Notably, even from a young age, Kroll exhibited abnormal behavior. He frequently wet the bed and abused animals. According to criminal psychology research, bedwetting, animal cruelty, and arson are 3 typical signs of what is known as the McDonald triad, which often appears in childhood and is an early indication of latent violent tendencies. These behaviors seem to foreshadow the criminal path Kroll would take later in life. At 55, after repeating several grades, Kroll was forced to drop out of school and began doing odd jobs, from working on a farm to being a factory worker. During his time on the farm, Kroll frequently witnessed animal slaughter. For most people, this was normal, but for Kroll, these scenes triggered a strange excitement. Later, he confessed that when he saw a pig being slaughtered, he felt a surge of sexual desire. He found satisfaction in those bloody scenes. As he grew older, Kroll also tried to build a normal emotional relationship with a woman, but it quickly fell apart. Later on, Kroll admitted that he often felt awkward and lacked confidence when he was with his girlfriend, especially in bed. He felt extremely uncomfortable and seemed unable to react normally during sex. His girlfriend eventually left him because of this, which led Kroll to a terrifying conclusion. He had to find people who couldn't complain about his impotence. Kroll lived at the very bottom of society, unable to build normal relationships or communicate effectively with those around him. This isolated way of life slowly distorted his soul, Moreover, post-war German society was struggling with deep moral and psychological wounds. The devastation of war, loss of loved ones, poverty, and instability pushed many people into despair and isolation. The social order was highly unstable, and in such an environment, along with Kroll's internal psychological turmoil and social alienation, it's possible these factors combined to form the foundation for his later extreme behavior. In 1955, Kroll's mother passed away, and in that same year, at the age of 22, he committed his first murder. Many analysts believe his mother's death might have completely shattered the anger and frustrations Kroll had repressed for so long. Her death not only made him lose the only authoritative figure and bond in the family, but it also meant that the last emotional connection he had with society was severed. All these factors increased the dark thoughts within him, revealing his true nature and pushing him to start killing in order to satisfy the twisted desires in his mind. On February 8, 1955, Kroll randomly met 19-year-old Omgust Tree, a runaway girl from Sexen, at a village near Worldsteppen Allen. Kroll was drawn to the blonde, charming girl and struck up a conversation, inviting her for a walk in the nearby forest. The girl, unaware of his intentions, agreed. They walked together down the road leading into the forest, but after about 200 meters, Kroll suddenly attacked her. The girl screamed and fought back, but Kroll, feeling humiliated, became enraged. In a fit of anger, he pulled out a sharp knife and stabbed her repeatedly in the neck until she passed out. After killing her, Kroll didn't just assault her, he also mutilated her body, similar to how he had seen animals butchered. He then dumped her body by the roadside and covered it with leaves to conceal it. It wasn't until 5 days later that a passerby found the body and alerted the police. When the police arrived, they witnessed a horrifying scene. There was significant blood and bodily fluids on the body, leading them to believe more than one person might have been involved. This mistaken reasoning led them to investigate in the wrong direction for a long time, causing them to miss the prime opportunity to solve the case. Meanwhile, Kroll, the perpetrator of all these crimes, felt an unprecedented sense of satisfaction and pleasure, as if he had opened a Pandora's box of crime. This feeling urged him to continue committing atrocities. In the early 1960s, Kroll moved to Taipei, Taiwan. At first, he worked as a janitor for a local company and later joined the Tyson Corporation, renting an apartment at 24 Frisian Street in the La District of Taipei. To his co-workers, Kroll was an ordinary, somewhat eccentric person. He was quiet and didn't interact much with others. However, no one could have guessed that this seemingly odd man would go on to commit 12 horrific murders in the surrounding area over the next 25 years. On June 16, 1959, Kroll encountered 24-year-old Clara Frieda Temmer by the side of the road in Selb, Germany. He struck up a conversation with Clara and tried to put his arm around her, but she rejected him, which infuriated Kroll. He began punching her in the head, and she fought back. During the struggle, both fell into a grassy patch by the road. In the intense scuffle, Kroll strangled Clara until she passed out. Then, he violated her body. The next day, Clara's body was discovered by a young girl riding her bike past the roadside. The body had signs of bodily fluids, and the police noticed several body parts, particularly the thighs and buttocks, had been cut off. According to Kroll, when he saw Clara's soft body, a disturbing thought entered his mind: to eat human flesh. And so he did. He wrapped pieces of Clara's flesh, took them home, and cooked them. The remaining meat was stored in his fridge, and he even experimented with different cooking methods to find the best taste. From that moment on, Kroll seemed addicted to this gruesome act. He believed it satisfied his primal urges while also saving on costs, truly a two-in-one solution. The first 2 murders went unnoticed, which made Kroll bolder. He began actively seeking his next victims, typically women walking alone on the street, as they were easier to control. From 1959 to 1962, Kroll continued to use similar tactics to kill 4 young girls. On June 7, 1959, 16-year-old Manuel Nanot became his next victim. While in Washington City Park, she was assaulted and strangled to death by Kroll. He cut the flesh from her thighs and buttocks and took it home to eat. On April 2, 1962, 13-year-old Peggy was brutally murdered by Kroll while she was playing alone in the forest in Dislaken Voodoo, Houston, Dweebuk. Her body was found in a roadside bush with several horrifying wounds. She had been strangled with a scarf, her red dress was torn, and there were bodily fluid traces on her body. In this case, the police mistakenly arrested Walter Quicker, a man with a criminal record. Quicker was sentenced to 12 years in prison and had to undergo psychiatric treatment. He was released 6 years later. Later that same year, on June 4, 1962, 12-year-old Monica Temple went missing while on her way to school. Her family immediately reported her disappearance to the police. After a week of searching, on June 11th, the police used a helicopter and found Monica's body in the forest near town. Kroll later admitted that he had been watching Monica on her way to school. He dragged her into a barley field, assaulted her, and then strangled her. He also cut meat from her thighs and buttocks to bring home and eat. In this case, Walter Quicker, a man with a history of child molestation, was arrested because a witness thought they saw him with Monica. However, due to a lack of evidence, the police had to release Quicker. Even after his release, Quicker was still suspected and condemned by his neighbors. His wife divorced him, and he was ostracized by the community. Local stores refused to serve him. Under the intense pressure of public opinion, on October 5, 1962, Quicker made a foolish decision to hang himself in the forest. 3 months later, on September 3, 1962, 12-year-old Barbara Bruder was reported missing while walking to school in Berlin. Kroll later confessed to killing her, but because her body was never found, he was not charged with the crime. A series of murders occurred in Dweebuk, with many people being wrongly accused and charged, while the real killer, Joachim Kroll, remained free and undetected by the police or neighbors. Time passed, and on August 2, 1965, Kroll killed Hema Smith. She was the only known victim of Kroll. That evening, Kroll saw Smith and her fiancée, Maria M., being affectionate in a car in a secluded place. Kroll pretended to need help to lure Smith out of the car, then used a knife to stab him. Kroll intended to kill and assault him, but she managed to escape in a panic, jumping into the driver's seat and driving away, hitting Kroll in the process. This was the only failed murder in Kroll's crime spree. Although M had clearly seen Kroll's face, her description of the ordinary-looking murderer did not provide useful clues for the police. Kroll continued to commit crimes and became more violent, accelerating his pace. From 1966 to 1969, Kroll killed 5 women using similar methods. Unlike many other serial killers, his victims varied greatly in age and appearance, ranging from a 5-year-old girl to a 60-year-old woman, with no clear pattern. On June 13, 1966, 20-year-old Ursula Doling was attacked near Mao after spending time with her boyfriend Adolf Koch. While crossing a park to go home, Kroll took notice of her. He struck up a conversation with Doling in the park, then used his right arm to strangle her and dragged her into the bushes, killing her. Her body was found 2 days later in a partially nude state, with her legs spread in the signs of assault. Although her boyfriend Adolf Koch was suspected and interrogated for a long time, he was released due to a lack of evidence. Unfortunately, unable to bear the pressure from the public, Adolf passed away due to a foolish act. On October 22nd of the same year, 11-year-old Inona was found in a ditch in Edison. She had been assaulted. Kroll later admitted that he had taken her by bus to the Gabata area, where he assaulted her in the woods. He then threw her into the ditch because he wanted to see how she would drown. On June 22, 1967, 10-year-old Gabrielle Bueller almost lost her life on a rural road north of a checkpoint. Kroll lured her into a grassy area and showed her pornographic images. When she tried to run away, Kroll strangled her. Fortunately, a whistle from a Continental coal worker at a nearby coal mine went off, and miners on their way home found and saved the girl. Kroll was unable to carry out his intended act. However, Gabriel's parents did not report the incident to the police to protect their daughter's reputation. It wasn't until 9 years later, after Kroll was arrested, that they reported the incident to authorities. On July 12, 1969, Maria, almost 61 years old, was murdered by Kroll near an area close to Edson. Kroll had taken a train from Dubuque to Edson, then traveled to Borden-Lassie in Wedden for a walk where he encountered Maria. He struck up a conversation with her, but she refused him. He then assaulted and strangled her in the bushes, killing her. On May 21st of the following year, Jack Tadon, a 13-year-old girl, was stalked by Kroll on her way home from the train station. As she passed through a forest, Kroll attacked her, assaulted her, and strangled her to death. On May 8, 1976, Karen Topper, a 10-year-old girl from VF, was brutally murdered by Kroll on her way to school. Due to the nature of Kroll's crimes, which lacked clear and distinctive signs, and the fact that the crimes occurred in various towns surrounding Dobuk, the police were unable to link the 13 murders together. Additionally, Kroll did not always eat the victim's flesh. He explained that he only selected certain parts of the body, preferring fresh, tender meat. Kroll had an ordinary appearance and kept to himself, making him not easily suspicious. Neighbors and acquaintances described him as shy, quiet, and reclusive. At that time, German society was still in a rebuilding phase after the war, and social order had not yet stabilized. Frequent crimes made it difficult for the police to focus on every case. These factors allowed Kroll to evade capture for over 25 years without anyone suspecting that a dangerous serial killer was living among them. The chain of Joachim Kroll's crimes finally ended in 1976. In July 1976, a disappearance occurred in Dobuk. A 4-year-old girl named Meridian Katter vanished while playing near her home. The police launched an extensive search but found no clues. However, the turning point came from Katter's own apartment in the Dobuk district. A few days after the disappearance, the neighbor Frank Z. Zustam noticed that the shared toilet in the building was clogged. Kroll had told him not to use it because it was broken and he had not yet fixed it. Suspicious, Zustam decided to check and repair the toilet himself. He was horrified when he discovered human-like pieces in the toilet. Frightened, Zustam immediately alerted the police. When the police arrived, they quickly searched Kroll's apartment. Kroll was cooking potato soup, and in the steaming pot, they found a human hand. Further investigation revealed body parts of victims stored in his refrigerator, frozen and unrecognizable. Kroll was immediately arrested. During questioning, Kroll was calm and cooperative with the police. He detailed his crimes over the past 25 years, admitting to killing many women and children between 1955 and 1976. He explained how he lured his victims, typically targeting women alone. Using his ordinary appearance to blend in, he would approach them, pretending to ask for directions or help. Once he gained their trust, he would lure them to a secluded area and kill them. He usually strangled or stabbed his victims, and also admitted to eating their flesh. Unlike other serial killers who treat cannibalism as a ritual or a trophy, Kroll's motivation was practical. He ate human flesh because meat was expensive. At the time, Germany's economy was in a severe depression, with high inflation, and the cost of essentials, especially meat, was skyrocketing. Kroll claimed he did this to save money. The police found ample evidence in his apartment, including body parts that matched his confession. To confirm the details of his story, they took Kroll to various crime scenes, asking him to reenact the attacks. Kroll was calm during these reenactments and showed no remorse. His cooperation and detailed confessions provided undeniable evidence, which led to his later prosecution. The trial was held in Dobuk, and the German public was shocked by the brutality of Kroll's actions. The case was widely covered by the media and attracted significant public attention. Kroll was charged with 8 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and multiple sexual assault charges. Some other cases could not be prosecuted due to lack of evidence. Despite Kroll's confessions, the trial faced difficulties in assessing his mental state and how it would affect his sentence. The defense tried to mitigate his responsibility based on his psychological condition, arguing that Kroll had a low IQ of only 76, equivalent to that of a preschool child. They also pointed out his childlike behavior, suggesting that his poor mental awareness made him less accountable for his actions. Psychiatrists examined Kroll during the trial and concluded that not only was he mentally impaired, but he was also a sadist. He had a tendency to associate sexual desire with violence, finding pleasure in the suffering of his victims. The defense lawyer argued that Kroll should be sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment rather than to prison, due to his intellectual disability and mental disorder, which made it difficult for him to fully understand his actions and their consequences. However, the prosecution argued that Kroll was fully aware of what he had done. They pointed out that his criminal actions showed a high level of calculation, such as always carrying a sharp knife. He was very careful when selecting his victims, mostly choosing women weaker than himself. This demonstrated that he was clear about his actions. Despite Kroll's limited intelligence, he still understood that what he was doing was wrong and should be held fully accountable for his crimes. The prosecution strongly pushed for the maximum sentence for Kroll, and the public gathered outside the courthouse, even calling for the reinstatement of the death penalty, which had been abolished in Germany for this cold-blooded killer. After 151 days of trial, in April 1982, the Dover District Court found Kroll guilty of 8 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, sentencing him to life in prison. This was the highest sentence under German law at the time. The court rejected the defense's claim that Kroll should not be criminally responsible due to his mental state, stating that, despite his intellectual impairment, he knew his actions were wrong and could control them. Kroll would spend the rest of his life in prison. According to prison records, Kroll was a silent and obedient prisoner, showing no visible emotional turmoil. He seemed resigned to his fate. In 1991, Kroll died in prison from a heart attack, ending his life filled with crimes. The story of Joachim Kroll is not just a typical case of a serial killer, but also a reflection of the distortion of humanity and the impact of societal indifference. His upbringing, from the ruins of World War II to the post-war rebuilding phase, took place in a Germany that was extremely poor and unstable. Post-war famine, material scarcity, and the breakdown of family structures left isolated individuals like Kroll without community attention or basic psychological support. From a lonely childhood with no place to turn to an adulthood full of difficulties and pressure, Kroll gradually transitioned from a victim of society to a perpetrator of crime. His feelings of inferiority and anger eventually turned into ruthless acts of violence aimed at innocent victims. Although Kroll's IQ was only 76, the cruelty and coldness he displayed in his murders were terrifying. His acts of abuse, mutilation, and dismemberment of victims exposed his pathological mindset. His irrational justification for eating his victims due to economic hardship reflected not only the long-term effects of post-war famine, but also an extreme disregard for human life. At his core, Kroll's case remains a significant subject of study in criminology and psychology. The complexity of his mental state shows that the influence of social environment and personal experiences on the formation of crime cannot be overlooked. His trial also sparked widespread public debate about how the law should assess the criminal responsibility of individuals with mental disorders and how to balance punishment with psychological considerations for offenders like Kroll, who grew up in a society devastated by war. How do we differentiate between a pathological mindset and a crime? How do we distinguish between a murderer beyond redemption and a victim deeply damaged by society and history? What do you think? Leave a comment below to discuss. Always stay alert and keep yourself safe. That's all for today's video. See you in the next one. Goodbye.